Hey, what's up? What's up? Welcome to another episode of the MT Agroeco Tales. My name is Thomas Malunda. It's been so long ever since I recorded an episode. I've been so busy, super busy that I wasn't able to release subsequent episodes ever since the one that I did on fertility. But I hope you've been keeping safe and sane. I've also been trying to do the same wherever I've been, with lots of travels. If you haven't yet watched the previous episode that we released on MT Agroeco Tales, I ask you to go and watch it. We were basically talking about fertility, what it is, how we can maintain it agroecologically, and I mentioned a number of things that we are doing on MT Agroeco Farm to make sure that we have fertile soils. So today I want to build on from there with part 2. The one that you watched on fertility was part 1. So today I'm going to speak through part 2, which is going to be a continuation from the previous episode, but now digging into productivity. I gave a preamble about what productivity is, but today I'm going to dig deeper into it and also talk about the things that we are doing here to make sure that we achieve that. So before I proceed, in case you've not subscribed yet to our channel, I ask you to do so, such that you don't miss out this and all the other interesting episodes and pieces of content that we usually release. So today I'm standing in the food crop section. So we have cassava here. We used to have maize, then we put cassava up. Like you can see, it is grown. We are about to begin eating cassava, and it's quite a healthy meal to have. So the section that I'm in is that, cassava. But when you look far behind me, there is our forest. The previous time I shot from the perennial section where we have our bananas, our coffee, but today I've changed. So like I said in some of the previous episodes, I'll be changing positions whenever I'm shooting, such that you have a glance of what MT Agroeco Farm looks like. And of course, eventually when we open it, I hope that you will come to check it out here on Busi Island. So the forest behind me, before the forest there are grasses. You can see grasses there, which we have. Those we use for mulching. So like I said in the previous episodes, all that we've grown on this farm has been deliberately put there to help us with each and everything that we want to accomplish on this farm. So this is where I am, and we can now jump into today's episode on soil productivity. So in the previous episode I mentioned that soil productivity is basically the ability of soil to support crop growth. So you see, for example, this cassava, the ability of this soil where it is sitting or standing to enable it come up the way it has, that's what we call soil productivity. So productivity of soils has quite a number of things that make it up. What I mentioned on the previous episode, fertility, is one of them, just like I said. And we said fertility is basically nutrients in the soil. I gave examples of nutrients and how they are categorized. I mentioned that they can either be major or macro, or micro or minor, with the major ones being those that are needed in high quantities and the micro ones being those that are needed in smaller quantities. So that's fertility for you, and different nutrients have different roles that they play in having a plant or a crop like this come up. So fertility is one element. There are other things that are so critical around productivity. One is the soil texture. So texture of the soil, like you see this, there are several textures of soil. Okay, but of course it could be sandy, it could be clayey, it could be loam. So all those determine whether a particular piece of soil will be able to support crop growth. And these are things that can be tested in the laboratory to understand the texture of your soil such that you can know if at all it will be able to support the crops that you want to put there. And of course, crops have the texture that they prefer, which is usually one that has loam in it. So if at all the soils that you have, which you plan on establishing your crops, have a lot of sand in them or have a lot of clay in them, then that means that that will affect the ability of that soil to support the growth of a crop like this one. So texture is the other thing apart from fertility. The other one is structure, the way the soil is built. And of course, structure takes into consideration things like the porosity. You know, the way soils are built, like the soil that I'm standing on, there needs to be pores in there. There needs to be pores where the water is stored or the moisture, and then there needs to be pores where the air is stored. Since the soils should be a habitat of life like organisms, then there needs to be air in there for those organisms to respirate. So if at all the air is not enough or is not available, which could be brought about by poor soil structures, and that is as a result of the soils being compacted. I'm going to talk about what causes compaction, but when the soils are compacted, that means that the pores in the soil would be affected. They would be closed, and hence there won't be sufficient air for the organisms in the soil to respirate. Two, there won't be enough space for the water to be stored. So you'll find that the soils are compacted, hence when water falls onto them, when it rains, instead of the water infiltrating into the soil, it will just run off because it has nowhere to go. Okay, so structure is very important if we are to have productive soils. The other one is pH. pH is basically the level of acidity or alkalinity of soils. And majority of our crops have a particular range in which they thrive, which is around 5.5 to 6.5. So that's a range where they thrive. If at all the pH of the soil goes beyond 6.5, then it tends towards alkalinity. And also if it goes below 5.5, it tends towards acidity. So those extremes are not appropriate for majority of the crops that we grow. There are some that thrive in those extreme pH levels. So for example, tea thrives in acidic soils. Okay, but then the majority of the crops that we grow for food don't. So pH is also very important. How can we understand the pH that we have in our soils? Soil testing is something that is key, which we can explore to understand that. Okay, so besides pH, the other one which is very important in terms of soil productivity is what we call soil organic matter. Those of you watching me, I don't know if you've been to a forest before, but when you look at the forest and the soils there, they're usually dark. They have that black color. So that black color that you see is brought about by what we call organic matter. Organic matter is very crucial in the soil. It's very important. It plays a lot of roles. One of them is to ensure that we have a great soil structure. I've been talking about the essence of having a good soil structure when I was talking about the porosity of the soil. So when we have soil organic matter, it helps to make the soils have a good structure. But besides that, soil organic matter acts as a buffer for pH. It prevents the pH from shifting into the extremes that I've mentioned. So soil organic matter is very important, and it usually helps our soils to become black. Usually when people see black soils, they conclude that the soils are fertile. Well, I want to tell you that when you see black soils, usually what your conclusion should be is that those soils are productive. Okay, so that's the benefit of following MT agroecologically, you're learning something. So we say that fertility is basically nutrients. Okay, it may be hard for you to see a particular soil and say that that soil is fertile. So organic matter is a number one indicator of productivity of soils, because it has a lot of roles it plays to enable the crops that are grown on that particular soil to come out well. So those different elements I've spoken about, fertility, texture, structure, pH, organic matter, are basically the things that make up productivity. So when we talk about soil productivity, what we are basically talking about is the availability of all of those things I've spoken about. And of course, if at all we have all those things in place, then that means that the soil will be able to support the growth of a plant like this one to come up vigorous the way you see it. Okay, so that is soil productivity. Why is it very important to make sure that our soils are productive? Of course, from whatever I've been saying, you should be knowing that answer now, because if the soils are not productive, then we shan't produce food. On the previous episode, I mentioned that soils can be fertile but non-productive, and that comes as a result of the soil having a lot of nutrients but not having the other conditions that are key for it to support crop growth. For example, the pH. If at all there are lots of nutrients in the soil, but then the pH is acidic, then what's going to happen is that those soils are going to fix the nutrients there. You'll find that, for example, nutrients like phosphorus will be available but inaccessible to the plants because they've been fixed. Okay, so it is very, very important to make sure that our soils are productive if at all we are to get utmost yield. If you remember at the start of this podcast, I say that in agroecology we are looking at three crucial things. One is social justice, two, environmental preservation, and three, economic viability. So if at all we are to hit the element of economic viability, which is going to come out of this, because if at all these come out well, we shall be able to harvest well and sell. So that means that if the soils are not productive, then we shan't harvest enough, and hence we shan't sell, and hence we shan't make money, and hence we shan't be agroecological. Okay, so whatever we shall be doing won't be agroecological. In agroecology, we need to be economically viable. Whatever we are doing should bring the returns. So that's why it is important. How do we ensure that our soils are productive? You should be wondering. Quite a number of things we can do. The first one is, and before I go into the first one, in terms of us wanting to have our soils productive, all we want to achieve is soils that are healthy. When you watching me are healthy, you are able to do several things, several tasks, several works that you gotta do, each and everything. But if you are unhealthy, then you can't do a number of things. So the same applies to soils. If all the soils are healthy, then they will be able to support this. Okay, so healthy soils equals to productive soils. So that's why it's important to make sure that all those things I've mentioned are there in the soil, in the recommended ranges. So how do we make soils productive? So the question that I'm posing is, how do we make sure that the soil has nutrients, it has good pH, it has good texture, it has good structure, it has soil organic matter? Those things that I've spoken about, because those things are what make up soil productivity. So all you gotta do is to bring all those things together. There is something that we can learn from if you want to get to that. If you want to make our soils productive or enable them have all those things that I've just mentioned, there is a template we can follow, and that template is a forest. Yes. When you go to a forest, I initially spoke about the organic matter, the black top layer, which you should have seen if at all you've been in the forest. But in the forest, you'll find a lot of things. So those different things in the forest are what we want to replicate on our fields, if at all we are to make them productive. Okay, so number one is soil cover. When you go to the forest, you'll find that there is a lot of litter which is on the surface coming from the plants or the trees. So they fall down. Of course, you know, the decomposition process leads into the formation of organic matter, that black layer that I spoke about. So when you look at where I'm standing, there are these here. So these are sort of litter. We slashed it, we didn't dig. We just slashed it from the surface and left it on the ground to cover the soil. And also there are some leaves like these ones. They are cassava leaves, the ones that have aged. They are dropping down. When they drop down, they're going to break down and contribute to the formation of organic matter, which we need here in our soils. Okay, so ensuring that the soils are covered is very important if at all we are to have productive soils. How do we do that? In the previous episodes, I spoke about, mulching. Okay, of course, you can see the litter, like I've said, it helps to keep the soils covered. Another strategy that could be used, which I spoke about in the previous episodes, is cover crops. In the previous episode, I think I spoke about the beans that we were using as our cover crops in the perennial section, which we actually harvested and sold off. So those cover crops also play a role in ensuring that our soils are covered. By doing that, they help to conserve the moisture in the soil, which we need for our soils to support crop growth. Okay, so soil covering is one of the things we can do to ensure that our soils are productive. Number two, diversifying of what we have on the farm. So in this particular section, we initially had soybean planted here. We harvested it and now we've left the cassava. So ideally, if we want to increase the productivity of the soil, we need to diversify things that we have on that farm through intercropping. So when we intercrop a plant like this with soybean, of course the soybean is adding nutrients to the soil, which is fertility and beneficial to our soils. But also when we harvest the soybean, we bring the litter back such that it contributes to organic matter. Okay, the other way of diversifying is crop rotation. We have several sections up there, like in our vegetable section, where initially we had veggies, but then we put there cereals in the next season, which we just concluded. So that process of changing what we grow on our soils is important in terms of the movement of nutrients from the deeper levels into the upper levels, but also it helps to break cycles of pests and diseases. Okay, so rotation of plants or crops is also crucial if we are to have that diversification. The other thing that is key in terms of diversifying crops that we have on the farm is it enables us, if we have several plants, they attract natural enemies or predators like the birds, which can help us to check on the pest levels on the farm. So diversifying of enterprises is very important. Number three is integration of livestock on the farm. So the reason as why that one is important still, first is nutrient cycling. It helps to ensure that the nutrients that we get from the plants and feed the animals return to the plants through manure. So that way we are not losing anything from the farm. And of course, we're adding the fertility of the soil. And of course, manure, besides bringing those nutrients, it also contributes to organic matter formation when it decomposes. So the incorporation or integration of livestock on the farm is important because it helps to cycle the nutrients to make the farm a self-sustaining system. And of course, livestock avails us with a source of nutrients, which is manure, like I've said. So by integrating livestock on our farms, we are contributing to that journey of ensuring that our soils are productive. Next is minimum soil disturbance. So I say that we had weeds here initially, but we didn't dig. We just flushed on the surface. You can see a lot of litter. We just flushed on the surface, left it on the surface to dry. What it's gonna do for us is to decompose, contribute to organic matter, but also if we don't disturb the soil by digging, then we leave our soil structure intact. I spoke about the essence of having a good soil structure, and I spoke about the fact that when soils are compacted, the structure is affected. One of the things that affects or leads to compaction of the soils is tillage. When we till the soils over and over, we contribute to compaction of those soils. By compaction, we mean that the pore space in the soil is closed. So where the air should have gone, that point is closed. Where the water should have stored or been stored, that point is closed. So that means that we would have the soils that don't conserve water. You know, when rain falls, the water will just be lost. It will just run off. And also, we shall have our organisms in the soil die because they won't have the air they need to respirate. So by limiting the disturbance of the soils, okay, we are contributing to maintaining a great soil structure. Like I said, all that we are doing is trying to replicate what's in the forest. If you go to the forest, nobody cultivates it. Nobody, like no one is gonna go there and begin digging. And that's why we have those thick layers that are black, which we said are formed as a result of organic matter being present. The last thing that we need to do is to make sure that our soils always have something in them. So maintaining of living roots all year round in this soil. So at every stage, at every time of the season, we gotta make sure that our soils have something in them. So I say that when we are removing these weeds, we don't dig, we don't remove the roots, we slash and leave those roots there, because those roots being there helps to enable them to decompose from there and contribute to organic matter. But also we can leave the living roots there. We can use cover crops like mukuna, which does well during the off season. So by maintaining those living roots of crops that we choose, which are appropriate at any given time of the season, we are contributing to making those soils productive. Okay, there are some aspects which we may not have much control over. For example, the texture. So if we find out that our soils are, for example, having a high percentage of clay in them, you know, we don't have much control over that. However, what we can do is to supply a lot of organic matter there. When we avail organic matter in the soil, it will help to make a good soil structure. So when that texture of clay is there and we add organic matter, you know, a lot of it will help those soils to turn into being productive. Same applies if it's to the cases when we have sandy soils. So if at all the soils have a high content of sand in them, we need to make sure that organic matter is added or produced a lot, because it is it that will help our soils to be having a good structure which will contribute to productivity. So basically, those are the things that we can do to make sure that our soils are productive. I've spoken about what productivity is, spoken about what it entails, the different conditions or aspects that make it up, and then how we can have it on ourselves. So if we are to achieve the three things that make up agroecology, which are economic viability, environmental preservation, and hence social justice, we gotta make sure that we put into practice those things that I've mentioned. Okay, so I hope that you have found this episode insightful, and I hope that you can get something that you can put into practice. Make sure that your soils are as productive as those in the forest, because what we want to do is to make sure that we replicate what's in the forest, bring it to our farms, and then support great growth of crops from which we can get food, but also some that we can sell off and get income, which can help to improve our livelihoods. As I conclude, if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, I remind you to do so, such that you don't miss out any content like this that I've shared today. Until next time, may the good Lord bless you.